A warm welcome to episode 7 of the Parallels podcast. It's brought to you by Africa Scotland Business Network. My name's Claire and I'm one of the 3 directors of ASBN, as we're fondly known. Africa Scotland Business Network is an international business community connecting the Africa continent with Scotland and back, and increasingly with businesses and governments across the world. I'm really excited to be in studio today with one of our fantastic member companies. It's Brian Rowan. He's the MD of Clyde Broadcast. And for those who follow and subscribe to the Parallels podcast, you'll know that Clyde Broadcast are actually our production partners. And one of the beauties of becoming part of ASBN is the people, the intelligence, and the ideas that flow internationally through our community. And it was actually Brian's idea that made us begin this podcast in the first place. So I'm really excited to be interviewing Brian today here in the Clyde Broadcast studio in Glasgow. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm fabulous. It's great to have you here. Fabulous.
So Brian, as the MD of Clyde Broadcast, has an incredible story behind him and the company. He is not only based in Scotland and doing business across the global north, but Brian is actually really active, predominantly in East and West Africa. Brian, it's great to have you in your own studio. Can you just tell us more about what Clyde Broadcast does and what your role is within the company?
Thanks, Claire. Clyde Broadcast, we're a manufacturer and systems integrator for the broadcast industry. We do manufacturing of studio products and studio software here in Scotland. We do integration and design. So we set radio broadcasters up across the globe in the UK, in the education sector, across Africa and the Middle East. And we do consultancy on TV and broader digital projects as the broadcast industry is changing. I'm the MD, come from the commercial side of the company. So I've been lucky enough to travel almost all over the whole world and to lead up the team here. We've got our own in-house developers, engineers, guys with hands-on experience.
Brian, I remember you said that you had a hunch to go to Africa and launch Clyde Broadcast there. Can you tell us more about that?
And yeah, I can. The first place that we went for business was Nigeria. And with a client that we did some discussions with, and there was an exhibition. So we thought, why don't we go there off the back of that and see what's to be seen? It was terrifying. The first day, I checked the guidance and it said, don't go out after dark, don't go on roads, take this pill and that pill, watch you're not kidnapped. That was back in 2006. And we did go, and we found it to be one of the most profitable markets, the most profitable market in the world outside the UK for us. So, and it's been a great adventure. So we're nearly at our 20th anniversary. So the first project we did in Nigeria was 2005. So we're nearly celebrating 20 years of active business in the country.
And you also have a team in Nigeria. Why Nigeria and not other countries in Africa?
Well, we have 2 offices in Nigeria. We have a lab in Abuja, where we do customer service and technical support for our own products and a range of other products from the US and from Europe. So we deliver that from our service centre there. And then in Lagos, we have our installation and service team. It's the biggest commercial centre. So we have 2 offices there. We do have other relationships. We have partners. We use engineers. We have organisations across East and West Africa. But Nigeria is the largest country in Africa and commercially the most active. And the broadcast industry there is very, very vibrant. So that's why the decision for Africa. But that team, although it's the Nigerian office, that installation, we do installation support for Ethiopia, Tanzania, South Sudan, Kenya, all coming out of that office. So those countries are places we've done installations in the last 18 months, and it's our African team, who happen to be based in Nigeria, that travel around the continent and do that better, and less impact on having somebody travel within Africa rather than sending engineers from Europe.
Right. And Clyde Broadcast, proud Scottish company, very, very heavy presence in Africa now. What is it about Clyde Broadcast that sets you apart in the industry?
What's the name? I mean, the name Clyde is the river, and to anybody that's listening from outside Glasgow, they might not be familiar with Radio Clyde, which is the big company here. And back in 1973, that Radio Clyde was the first commercial station in the UK outside London. And from that original genesis, they had to build their own equipment because they weren't commercial suppliers. And as I say, the origins of Clyde Broadcast are from the engineering team at Radio Clyde way back then. So our guys are in the business. We're not kind of from outside designing. We understand what our clients need, what our sector needs, and that operational understanding of the customer requirement, I think, is what sets us apart. It's not technology for technology's sake. It's to deliver a business objective. It's to get in the commercial sector, it's to get return. And in the public sector, it's to make sure that you're able to put your messaging out with the staff profile that you have, and to do that ideally as efficiently as possible so you can cover more ground and more of your remit.
And you've discussed quite a lot of African nations that you are servicing, that you're operational in. Do you have maybe 2 or 3 key achievements that you can share with the listeners here today?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think that if we kind of zoom out, I think probably our biggest achievement is to be an integral part of the broadcast industry in those countries. It's not an easy thing, I think, to do, to go to a completely different environment and to be able to understand and reflect the requirements of that specific place, as opposed to being an outside expert. But for instance, the National Broadcast Commission in Nigeria, NBC, had us lead their panel on new technology, where we brought companies to that show to discuss new technology, and we did the first ever public sanctioned by the regulator discussion on podcasting. Nice to be here. And within that, we were the people selected to interview the BBC on the BBC's podcasting structures in Africa. So to be asked to do that by the regulator and to be seen as understanding the Nigerian environment, we were part of the panel that revised the Nigerian Broadcast Code, the last revision in 2019. So to be asked as a broadcast professional to go and actually help rewrite the code in someone else's country, I would think that's the biggest achievement. We have set up the 2 largest commercial broadcast networks in Nigeria. We digitized, in conjunction with Sony, the National Radio Broadcast Network in Ghana. In Kenya, 80% of the national public sector listening on KBC is through Clyde equipment. We set up the first commercial FM radio station in Kenya. That was 1989. We did that. So that precedes me by some distance. But we set that up in 1989, and 23 years later, we refurbed that station, which is a testament to the longevity of our equipment and a terribly inconvenient business model. So clients love you, and it lasts, the equipment is so reliable. But from that, it gave us huge access to the Kenyan market and kind of the go-to for commercial projects there. So I think to be part of another country's broadcast ecosystem is something that I take most satisfaction from, and of course that's peppered with these cherries, which are these contracts or these commercial or public sector achievements.
Fantastic, Brian. That's really great to hear. So in terms of your expansion intra-Africa, is it mostly due to word of mouth, or what has been key to expanding, not just in Kenya, Nigeria, but into other African markets? How have you went about that?
Again, these are well-researched questions. I have to really think about it. I think, first of all, you need to be where the conversations are taking place. So we'll find it, rather than having the discussions in Europe, there's international conferences in America, Amsterdam, Singapore, Dubai, which we do attend, but our focus is really to look at the regulators and the events inside the country, because that's where you're getting access to the issues and the challenges the broadcasters are facing in that region. And I think that's where we can bring our expertise to bear in terms of designing solutions specifically for that set of challenges. That's the first place. To know what's needed firsthand directly, that means you can provide a solution which should be superior to one that's designed from 6,000, 10,000 miles away. So that's part one, and part two is to follow that through. And once you've done that, you can have proven that it works. It's kind of, this is what we do, this is who's used it, this is how it works, and we'd love to do business with you. And you kind of, you're judged by your results. And that works very well, because we do find that people really value a proven solution, and they value track record, and they're looking to rely on a company that's going to be in Africa and is going to stay there and is going to service them over a long period of time. With these projects are in general the beginning, of at least a 10-year business model. So that's how we kind of do it. We like to be judged on our results.
So 20 years experience with Clyde Broadcast in African markets. You'll be aware more than most about some of the narratives that can surround business, other governments, about doing business on the African continent, such as it's quite daunting, it's challenging, a bit risky, sometimes even a bit crazy. Do you have a story that you can share with our audience here today?
I think the idea when you're dealing on the continent, and each country in the continent is different, it's very unique. They have their own ways and practices. It's not kind of generic. In the way that Europe's not generic, Africa's not generic. And a lot of the ideas, it's just a different way of doing business, that we're not familiar with that difference. So a lot of it's good to do with dealing that, but understanding and dealing with that difference. I do recall we discuss a lot of what we're doing is project management and delivery to date. So we have a very particular structure of how we work. And we work slightly different with French companies, work slightly different with US companies. And this was a few years ago, but we had a contract to deliver 16 stations. And at the time, that was the biggest commercial expansion in Nigerian commercial radio history. So a really big deal for us, a big feather in our cap. And we delivered a pilot project to kind of assess the issues. And we'd some difficulties in it. At the launch of the pilot station, which coincided with the company's anniversary as a PLC, I met with the chairman and discussed some of these issues. And said, we've got these issues. We came up with a project. How can we design them out of the process for the rollout of another 15 stations? Because there's a lot to cover. And he said, I've got the solution for you. Don't worry. Because I spaced up a technical document. And he said, I want you to sit in on a meeting. I was like, oh, great. Who's there? And he kind of lined off. I was like, okay, that's all the stakeholders and a group of people I don't know. And we went into this meeting, and he promptly opened the board meeting of this PLC company, ran through the agenda, introduced everybody to me, and then said, Brian will now lead the meeting. Which was, and there was the faces in the room. I knew some, and everyone that I did know was like really impressive. They're a real face in the broadcast industry, and everybody had a title, and it was a little bit daunting, but you always go back to basics. So I got my notes, I went through, and I said, right, yeah. And what I was looking to do was really to check where we were. So I said, let me go back to basics. Where are we with these 15 stations? Before I get into the detail, I said, can I just check we've got the right 15? So I ran through the cities, and in the list, there was a bit of rearranging. Oh, no, we're not doing that city, we're doing that city, which is a huge change, to plan logistics, that you would change the city. I was like, oh, right, okay, this is a bit more flexible, a bit more fluid than I thought. So well, maybe let's just recap. So can I just check one by one? My instinct was that you're taking up a lot of senior level time with trivial detail, but I didn't want to get anything wrong. So I'm going to check this city. How is it? And we're all fine. We're all good to go. So we can start at yes. And then I said, can I check, do we have the electrics in place? Is there a substation? Is everything in place? They went, oh, small problem. Okay, so I'll mark it down. Not quite. What about this? I asked, I think it was is the broadcast tower there? Is the tower in infrastructure? Is that there? They said, no, there's a problem with that. So well, where exactly are we with that? And someone raised a hand and said, there's a small problem, sir, to the chairman. And I was like, well, he said, what's the problem? And he said, the problem is the land. I said, well, what's the problem with the land? Because you just told me the building is ready to go, ready for our team to come in. What's the problem with the land? He said, we don't have any to put the building on. and it was a real kind of, it was a real introduction. These were aspirations. And I don't think that the person responsible had thought that a contractor would get their act together to roll this out. Maybe he thought he'd be last. We were working to very specific, very tight, aggressive time schedules, and it turned out the building hadn't been started yet. It was funny.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that I was there to do that job on behalf of the chairman to kind of get this freed up. But it's good to get an understanding, and it did make us chuckle. And what we were able to do with that project was we realised we couldn't deliver that with our standard model, and to fully resource that on the expectation based on the client's dependencies wasn't going to work. So we set up a separate team that was available in Nigeria using some of our own staff, managed from the UK, working to a certain set of specifications, and using some contractors that we trained up on the first 3 projects, that they were then available as a standby resource as these were ready to kind of put up. And we rolled that out, and subsequent to that, we rolled out another 15 stations afterwards. So the largest commercial radio network, definitely in West Africa, and I think in Africa. But somebody listening to this might prove me wrong, but I don't think I am.
That's incredible, Brian. Well done. And I think what you've just mentioned now is testament about your approach to doing business in Africa. You have to be solution orientated. You have to be adaptive. You have to engage local content. You have to empower local people on the ground to work with you in partnership. And you almost have to ride the wave of what's put in front of you at that moment in time.
Yeah, I think so. One of the feedback, we get feedback from customers and about some of the difficulties that they face dealing with non-Indigenous countries. And there's almost a kind of transactional or a combative kind of approach, sometimes in terms of support and product, that there's your interest and my interest, and halfway between there is acceptable. But halfway between those 2 points isn't always a useful solution. I think you really have to understand and not try to be contract focused. You're solution focused, and you try to then have your contracts reflect what's been agreed, rather than trying to use your contracts to protect your own interest. I know it's very counterintuitive in the kind of contract lawyer-led type business transactions we have here, but if you don't have personal relationships and you don't have that understanding, you'll be judged by in my experience, you're judged by your word and your bond and the commitments you make person to person more than you are your adherence to contracts. You need to do both, but it's the former that really influences how you will be accepted within the business community.
And I think that's why it's so important that, you are regularly in Africa. you have to have feet on the ground there. You have to be in front of people in meetings to shake the other person's hand, the classic African handshake. It does mean so much to the people there.
Sorry, I'm going to say there is no classic African handshake. And I know this because when I try to click fingers with my Chinese friends, they look at me like I'm from another planet. So no, very specific handshakes in different places. So
True.
the importance of the handshake is universal, but the mechanics are very specific.
Yeah. Like I know living in South Africa, it's the handshake and then it's like the thumb and then back to the handshake.
Oh no, West Africa, you got to click.
The click,
That's it.
And it's not just the formalities and the handshakes about Africa and doing business there. It's also exciting. So what's something that really, really excites you about Africa today?
Very specifically, I'm excited that I don't know my next trip, but I'm certainly going to be there in October. I'm going to see Felibration, which is a week-long celebration of the music and culture of Fela Kuti in Lagos. So that excites me, and more broadly, the music and culture is fantastically diverse, and the attitude to culture and music generally is really interesting. It forms a different part of everyday life than my experience here. And the most exciting thing is the people, the resilience, the persistence, the inventiveness. It's really exciting. Once it takes a while to adapt, to kind of get a gauge of the pace, but it's a really lively place. It's so young compared to Europe. Just the age profile, everything's young. People are going places. They want things to happen, and the speed of technological change is incredible. It's in the last 10 years, Lagos, in my experience in Lagos, has advanced far more than my home in Glasgow has. You can just see the rate of change, and everybody's ready adopters. There's no such thing as old people. Anyway, it's really interesting, the take up of technology and the ambition. It is an inherently exciting place.
Thanks so much, Brian, for taking part on episode 7 of the Parallels podcast, brought to you by Africa Scotland Business Network. Clyde Broadcast have been a brilliant part of ASBN for the past 2 years now. They represent just one of the 27 different sectors that are in our global network. It's been great to have you on the show, Brian. Thank you so much.